All right, we're starting now. Ursula,
Okay.
we're just going to start this. Everybody, this is Greg Everett. We have Ursula over there. She'll start talking in a second, but I told her to be quiet for a moment so we can actually start this episode. This is episode number 8. And thank you guys, everyone who's gone and rated and reviewed the podcast on iTunes or wherever else. We appreciate it. It helps. Keep doing it. Vote early, vote often. I used to say in Chicago. Same thing. Go make multiple user accounts on iTunes and give us 5 stars like 100 times. You'll get absolutely nothing out of it other than the satisfaction of knowing that you have our eternal gratitude. Guys, go check out our show sponsor, healthiq.com/catalyst. They use science and data to get special rates on life insurance for the health conscious, including weightlifters, who actually tend to have better sleep, better cholesterol, and lower risk of early death, but tend to pay higher rates because they have high BMIs, which we all, of course, know is totally inaccurate. Check it out, healthiq.com/catalyst. All right, so we have 4 potential questions, but I have a feeling, well, you know what, we might actually get all 4 of these. We'll see. I put the original first one last, though, because I didn't want that to take up all the time. You ready? You ready to drop knowledge bombs, as the kids say? Yeah, Taylor, of course.
All right, Taylor.
All right, Taylor asks, first, awesome you're doing a podcast. Thanks, Taylor. I really don't know how you guys do it, but I'm immensely thankful for the thoughtfulness and consistency from which you put out quality information on the sport. Thanks, Taylor. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we don't know how we do it either.
Oh, I know how, but...
Well, I mean, it takes us a while to just get it together to be able to set up a time. That's been our biggest challenge.
Yeah, it's Ursula's
coordinating
fault,
the schedule.
which was exactly what I told her the problem would be in the beginning. But
yeah, well, I didn't say you were going to be wrong. I was just saying we'd figure it out.
No, we should do it. All right.
It'll work. We can do it.
Here's
do
Taylor's question. Many coaches have drills for improving speed in the split jerk, both speed for splitting the feet and speed under the bar, arguably the same thing. However, what about building the speed of the drive? Push presses have been helpful, and I'd consider doing push jerks if this particular athlete had more overhead or / upper back mobility. Thoughts? Individual mentioned is a 77-kilo male with a push press of mid-80s and best split jerk in the low hundreds at the time of this question. In my observation, footwork is there but fails to get aggressive, extending the legs fully while split jerking. Thanks in advance. Looking forward to the show. Well, so we basically have an issue, a couple of things potentially, right? Is that she's pointed out probably not enough speed in the drive and or elevation in the drive and or timing in the drive, as in maybe he's getting speed on the bar, but he's not continuing to drive long enough to get enough speed, or his timing is off, so he's just cutting off a little short. I guess that's considered the same thing. Ursula, anything pop out to you on this?
Well, I mean, that's just kind of the cutting. It would be analogous to the cutting of a pull.
Yep.
So you're not like finishing the extension. I think my suggestion just on that one piece, there's like a couple of exercises they could bring in. I don't know if we want to go there yet, but like jerk drives.
Yeah, that's what she's asking is what are the drills for improving the speed of the drive or the height of the drive?
And I'm not the biggest fan of jerk drives. I kind of am a bigger fan of just like jerk dips. But with what she's particularly describing, I think you'd need an actual jerk drive.
Yeah. Well, so let's clarify.
The bar in the air, and then you have to kind of catch it back down on the chest, which again is some extraordinary core work and strengthening your core. But it's because you have to do these with overloaded. Well, you should do them at about 100% or more. That makes them difficult, and so you have to really work at them with lower percentages until you learn how to do the timing of receiving the bar back down on the chest. I mean, that becomes the biggest challenge. But I think I used to do jerk drives, and I think they did a really good job in getting me to really punch at the top of the drive of the jerk, so that I didn't prematurely go into. And that's what we're talking about. It's the anticipation of the split that will cause someone to truncate the extension.
Yeah. So just so everyone's clear, jerk drive, you're basically going to dip and drive the bar just like you would for a jerk, but instead of actually getting under it, you're just going to kind of push the bar up off the shoulders with the arms, and anywhere from a couple to 6 inches, depending on the weight and how aggressive you are. But and I'm with you on that. That I really like that exercise in theory. In practice, though, it there's a lot of potential problems, and it's exactly right. Is it can be really effective if the athlete is doing it properly. And to me, the biggest issue is not necessarily bringing the bar back down, although that's tough on you. But I do think that's good for you. It's just like lowering jerks. And that itself will actually help you kind of build elasticity in the legs for the jerk. But the issue that I see for most people is that they push the bar forward. So, with a jerk, you can kind of pull your head back out of the way and then pop it back through as the bar passes. With a jerk drive, it's tougher because you kind of have to keep your head back out of the way the whole time. And there's a tendency to push the bar forward off the shoulders to make sure that you don't, knock yourself out.
What about
so
just
you end up building that habit? What's that?
Yeah. Well, and I used to I thought, well, maybe I'll just throw it onto the block. I'm like, that's worse. Now I'm learning to throw the bar forward.
Right. Yeah.
So that was the next right away. What about a jerk with a pause in the dip?
Yeah. So there's a bunch of drills that I think they're helpful. That jerk with the pause, or I just call them pause jerks. So you'd hold 2 to 3 seconds at the bottom of that dip and then drive from a dead stop. That's good both for, that rate of force development. So really having to generate that force as fast as possible without the help of any elastic rebound. But it should also help with timing a bit too, because you're going to naturally drive longer in from a dead stop than you would with a normal kind of elastic rebound. The other one you can do with that too, which I've never seen anyone do this, I'm sure someone else has thought of this because it seems fairly obvious, is actually drive a jerk from the blocks. So in other words, set the blocks high enough so that the bar is, the weights are resting on the blocks in your bottom dip position. And so that not only are you going from a dead stop, but just like snatching or cleaning off the blocks, you're going from a relatively low tension situation. So there's even more of that need to generate force faster.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so if you have the means to set that up, like you can get your jerk blocks high enough, and you're not doing some sketchy thing where you're stacking plates on there so that if you miss, the thing explodes.
Well, when you're 5'2", all jerk blocks are high enough.
That's true. You have the opposite problem. And she mentions push presses. I do think push presses are really good for this. And even more so doing complexes of push press plus jerk, or like push press plus power jerk plus jerk. Because again, the dip and drive and the timing of the push press should be the same as the jerk, but for a lot of people it's not. They become completely different, and that's a problem.
Well, when you're
when
doing
you work in a
high
complex,
rep
that
stuff,
helps.
I think it really ruins your drive. I mean, and she doesn't mention any of that, but just in general, I'm sure you've seen this too. Whenever you get people who have come over who are used to doing like thrusters or clusters or push press for sets of 15, they don't learn to generate any acceleration. They just do everything very mono speed. Like there's speed, but there's no acceleration, and that's really what she's
efficiency.
Talking about
it's just enough to get it done.
Right. And so then when you transfer over to trying to jerk heavy, they keep that same tempo, and it's not enough of a thrust off the chest for the bar to get the speed that it needs to get the elevation or the force. So the acceleration is missing, and the force as one of the variables of force. Right. And then you see it affect those people particularly. I love complexes in the jerk, and we do exactly what you said. We do the push press power jerk split jerk, and I'll usually do like a if I'm working on the split, then we'll do like 1 push press, 1 power jerk, 2 split jerks. Or if I'm, if it's relatively lightweight and I want speed of the feet, then we'll do more of the push press and the power jerk, so that they're a little fatigued and their bar's not going to go so high on the split jerk, so they have to move faster with their feet. So, I mean, you can both order those and order your rep scheme to kind of either benefit splitting versus driving, depending on what you're trying to figure out. And if you know that those are both a problem, then that complex is perfect. Yeah.
And so the other thing to consider is whether it's really an issue directly of being able to generate speed, or if the issue is actually originating in the ability or inability to arrest that downward movement in the dip and change directions adequately. So in other words, you'll see a lot of people who, once the weight gets heavy, they completely lose the proper rhythm and that timing of the dip and drive.
Like
and so
the reverse of the momentum.
Right. They'll hit what should be the bottom, and they'll kind of bog down like it's soft. Versus you watch the best jerkers in the world, and it's a rock solid bottom dip position. I mean, they come to a dead stop immediately, and that is really crucial for kind of generating as much elastic energy both in the body and in the bar that you can then put into that upward drive. So if you're missing that ability to stop really abruptly, you're throwing away a lot of that potential upward speed and elevation. And so then, like Ursula said, jerk dips. So, well, I look at it this way: a jerk dip squat, in my parlance at least, is just a slow, controlled movement into the bottom of the dip, and then a relatively slow, controlled recovery to the top position. And so that's like your base. That's like the overhead squat kind of thing, where everything is very controlled. You're working on maintaining constant tension. You're focused on balance. You're focused on the trunk rigidity. And then you move into something like a jerk dip, which is basically dipping as fast as possible and then trying to stop as fast as possible and kind of hold in that bottom position and let that weight really slam down on you. So you're developing the ability to stop that weight as quickly as possible and maintain that position. And so that's where you start building that kind of the foundation of being able to use that elasticity. And then you have the jerk drive, which kind of is both, where you're going to get that the dip that would be the same speed you would use in a jerk, that really rapid stop in the bottom, and then the proper timing and change of direction. So that timing is everything. And I think you have both ends of it, right? People who get bogged down in the bottom and wait too long, and not that they're waiting too long, that they can't change direction because they're stuck, because they're weak or they went too far.
That the depth of the dip may be off.
Right.
Like they may be going too deep.
Yeah. And then you have the ones who will try to change directions too quickly. So it's not, you can't change direction. Well, put it this way. Basically, the deeper you dip, the longer that transition period will be from the dip to the drive. Although we're talking about fractions of a second here. But people will try to change directions literally immediately. And what's happening is you're trying to change direction against a bar that's still moving down. And you're getting more downward force than there is weight on the bar. So you say you have 100 kilos on the bar. When you accelerate into the bottom of a dip and stop, there's more than 100 kilos of force pushing down on you at that point. And so if you try to change direction at the wrong time, you're fighting like far more weight than you would be if you time it properly and that bar has kind of started whipping back up. And is essentially lighter for that split second. So that right. Timing is really important. And so I think for that, doing things like jerk drives, but I think push presses and power jerks in particular are good for that. But at weights where you can get that feel of the rhythm. And then the other one for timing is jerk behind the neck. And I think because it's a more comfortable rack position, it's really solid, people are more confident, they can naturally find that timing better when they're going from behind the neck than from the front. And so doing those like a jerk behind the neck plus a jerk is another good complex that I found for getting that timing and that drive in the split jerk.
And it's, I think, one of the better exercises to do for actual speed of the split when you're going back to the split in the front, because the bar trajectory from behind the neck is shorter. So you have to move your feet out to their position faster. And if you can get that same timing of the split over to the front where you have a little bit longer bar trajectory, you can actually speed up your split. And so you can get someone who tends to move their feet not quickly enough to move their feet more quickly. We use it for that as well. Shut up, quicklier. You mentioned you went behind the neck, and she asked a question. This particular she said something about push jerks.
Oh, yeah.
This
bad mobility.
Particular athlete had more overhead or upper back mobility. I think just for improving overhead mobility, behind the neck work is crucial.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you already have it, like you should still kind of reinforce it by doing some of your either push press, power jerks, or split jerks behind the neck, because it continues to stretch out the pecs and the shoulders so that you have a comfortable rack position. And I say this as a person who doesn't have a comfortable rack position, just frankly due to rarely jerking and cleaning and age mostly, and some shoulder injury. But just, as you get older, you get a little bit tighter, and it's a little bit harder to have that mobility. Going from behind my neck now for me is a stretch. It's like one of the exercises I use to get my shoulders ready and my overhead position ready for even jerking from the front.
Yeah. And
so it's great for that.
Yeah, 100%. I like it. So if let's say you've got a 12 to 16 week cycle, I love starting out, the earliest prep mesos that will do our overhead work from behind the neck primarily for that same reason. It's not just the mobility, but the upper back strength. It helps you with that, T-spine extension strength and stability. It really reinforces the overhead position because it's a directly vertical bar path rather than having to go back a little bit from the front of the shoulders. So there's a lot of reasons to do that. Although, of course, this has nothing to do with Taylor's question, but just as an aside, all very helpful. I think that's the one last thing I would say about the speed of the drive would be jumping exercises. And I think these go overlooked a lot. I think largely because people aren't really sure how to incorporate jumping into a program. And I don't know, there's not a lot of great information on it that I've found in weightlifting. And so a lot of what I do is based on just kind of experimentation I've done or what I've seen other good coaches do.
You can take general principles and say, okay, during power cycles, we do a little bit more jumping. And so, that's one of the phases, but you can do them heavier.
Right.
Strength phases,
Yeah. So, I know you use like quarter squat jumps. We use jumping squats off the blocks. That's, concentric only. I really like back squat jumps. So, like 20-25% of your back squat, full squat, right away rebound, maximum jump. All the things like that those are all going to help. And even just a regular box jump or a regular vertical jump with, kind of your standard quarter squat depth counter movement. Something interesting about that to pay attention to is the depth and the timing of your counter movement when you do, a maximum vertical jump attempt. That's going to be reflective of what's going to work best for you in a jerk in terms of your dip depth and your rhythm, your timing there. And so pay attention to that, and maybe one day experiment, just do some straight vertical jumps with a fairly upright torso and try dipping pretty deep and messing with the timing there, which should be slower, like you'll stay in the bottom a little bit longer before you change directions, and then try dipping much more shallow and see you're going to have a quicker timing and kind of see what feels better, what gives you a better jump. And that should give you some clues on what's going to work best for you in the jerk.
Well, and I would say the same about, and we're going to get to a question that actually deals with this, I think, a little bit. The Dave question. What we're looking at is impulse. And so it's this force time curve. And it takes us into a whole other realm, because then you start talking about the physiology of the athlete. Are they fast twitch, slow twitch? And it's one of the things that makes coaching weightlifting difficult, is that you're dealing with every single individual. And when they tell us in manuals that your dip depth is anywhere from 8 to 14% of your body height, of your actual height, that's a big range.
Yeah,
and I think you usually tell
way big range.
Right.
I like 8 to 10%. I kind of stick with that range.
Right, but there's such a variety, and in the literature I've read, in the Russian manuals, they give you 8 to 14.
A various variety of variations.
Yes. Anyway, so what we're saying is that, if you can stay around the 10, then it seems good. But if you have somebody who is particularly, I was talking about my athlete that I mentor that is not particularly talented. Nice. We've had to experiment a lot with his, because his jerk is it's difficult for him because he's not really a fast twitch athlete. Like, it's documented. Various tests.
It's public record.
Yeah. So he, we're looking at, like, are you applying a lot of force over a short period of time? Those people can dip really short and they can generate a lot of force that way. And then you have people who have to dip a little bit deeper to generate force, but then they're applying force to the bar for a longer period of time to get the bar high enough. They generally look slower because they are slower. And so, I mean,
they're still good people.
Right,
they're just different kinds of people.
You're just going to have to work a little bit harder to get better at the jerk because you don't have that ability to reverse the momentum. I think one of the things you pointed out that is something people can generally work on is understanding the flex of the bar, because you were describing like the bar coming down and then having the timing so that when the bar whips back up, you actually drive at that moment. And I think Jess is a real good example of somebody who's really good at this. You can see her bar sitting and it's still moving, and it's not her oscillating. It's the bar oscillates when it has a lot of weight on it.
Especially a women's bar.
Right. And so, but learning how to feel that oscillation and timing when you're going to drive is a big deal. Every time in weightlifting, every time I take a bar out of a rack to squat, I feel the bars, I let the bar oscillate and I feel it. Yeah. I feel its energy, and that helps me squat. But I feel the elasticity.
You're not being the bar, Ursula.
I am one with the bar. And I feel its elasticity, and I do the same thing in the jerk. Now, obviously, you can't intentionally oscillate, or maybe you can, because it seems like a lot of people at Worlds can get away with it. But if you can just learn how to feel. Now, of course, the person doesn't have enough weight on the bar, then this brings up a whole other problem. But
yeah.
But just learning how to feel the elasticity of the bar can have some benefit ultimately when you're trying to get to your true max in a jerk.
Yeah, and so that actually reminded me of an exercise that I forgot to mention on here. I call jerk springs. And so
you just made that up just now.
No. I made it up a long time ago. It's so you're basically going to dip into the bottom, and you're just going to use kind of a really short dip and drive there to repeatedly hit the bottom and let that bar rebound. And so you change direction with the rebound of the bar. And so you basically cycle that, 3 to 5 times or something. The idea being to exactly what you were just saying is feel that timing of the bar changing direction with that whip and learning to time your change of direction with that. And so I think I first saw that being done, and I forget who it was, a Chinese lifter on one of Randall Strawson's old World Wish You Were There videos. And so, I mean, you need a significant amount of weight. The trick, tons of video from 95. Yeah, it was late 90s probably, but the trick is using enough weight that you can get the bar moving properly, but not so much that you can't keep yourself in the proper position, because there's no point in practicing any of this stuff if you're completely out of position. If you're doing jerk dips or jerk dip squats and you're dropping your chest forward and sitting your hips back, well, maybe you'll feel some timing better, but you're now training a terrible position for the jerk, so it's not going to matter. You'll have a great drive at a 45-degree angle
forward.
Yeah, which, if I recall my high school physics, I think that's like the best trajectory for maximum distance of a projectile, but we need a specific trajectory, not just distance.
Right.
All right, are we good on that?
Well, and that's another reason that behind the neck people can usually jerk more, because of the change in the dip.
Right. Yeah, you will get a little more hip into it and a more direct bar path, so it's easier all around. So it's a good confidence builder, too, for that reason.
Sure.
Okay, we ready for Channing?
We're ready for Channing.
All right, Channing, here we go, buddy. I hear a lot from my coach about staying over the bar with the shoulders, and I think I now do it to excess. You're not alone. Essentially, if I stay over and extend the legs, I feel like I'm onto my toes and either jump forward or miss completely because I've hit the bar away from the body. How does one balance staying over the bar and also keep the heels down and weight back? If this causes you to jump back, is it wrong? And this is your question. You were talking about balancing the system. Yep. And like different ways to balance the system. This is that. I mean, that's the overview. Like a lot of these questions fall into categories, and this is one of those. This is in the weightlifting category. This is definitely reminiscent of a couple. I don't remember, maybe 2 episodes ago, where we talked about this issue of people getting too far back on the heels and then overcompensating and rocking forward. And so Channing, obviously,
this is the antithesis of that. Yeah.
Well, I can't see it, but based on what you're saying, I think what's happening is that in order to get way over the bar with your shoulders, which you probably are doing to excess, you're pushing your knees and hips way back and probably pushing the bar way back with them, which means that you're going to end up rocking forward because that system's out of balance and that bar is too far back. And so when the bar goes too far back relative to the foot, so, rather than the bar moving from kind of the front quarter of the foot to sort of the middle of the foot as it comes off the floor and moves towards the hips, you're moving it kind of towards the back half of the foot. So it's like the bar is over your heel, which is too far back. And so the only way to kind of readjust that is, as your hips come forward, as they extend, it's pushing the bar straight forward versus the bar kind of moving straight up at that point and the hips moving forward in to meet it and then both moving up together in a balanced position over the whole foot. So what I would say is just be careful that you're not, that pull from the floor. Don't go crazy and push your knees back. Don't shoot your hips up. I would say for most people with the bar at the knee, the shoulders shouldn't be more than very slightly in front. And even for some people, depending on the build, they may still be pretty much directly above the bar. Like, your arm is almost vertical. And then the shoulders will be in front of the bar as it gets a little higher on the thigh.
Obviously, not to interject, but that can depend on torso length.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is depending on how someone's built, that's going to vary a little bit. But what I see is a lot of people when the bar's at the knee, the shoulders are dramatically forward of the bar.
Yeah, they almost look like, to me sometimes what I feel like he's describing is a snatch grip good morning into a snatch.
Right. Yeah, it's a snatch grip RDL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
stiff
RDL.
legged deadlift.
That's what I use.
And so this the trick is staying over the bar part is a timing issue rather than a distance issue. In other words, if Ursula and I are saying keep your shoulders over the bar, we're more than likely not saying put your shoulders farther forward over the bar. We're saying keep them in that position in front of the bar for longer before opening your hips. I like the mid thigh as my reference point. So I'm telling people I want you to be over the bar until the bar is at mid thigh, which is pretty high. In reality, you're going to see those hips start to open, usually kind of closer to right above the knee. And again, that does depend on proportions. If you got a really short-legged, long torso lifter, they're going to tend to open up sooner to get more leg drive into it. Versus a longer-legged, shorter torsoed person will typically be able to stay over a little longer and get more hip into it. But the point is, you need to learn to distinguish between the timing and the actual position. And so I'm sure we talked about this in the couple episodes ago, all the exercises like, halting snatch deadlift, or, segment or pause pulls, or segment or pause snatches, coming off the floor, pausing at the knee, making sure you're in the good position and you're balanced. Then pausing again at mid thigh, making sure you're in a good position and you're balanced, and then snatching from there. That I would call that a segment snatch. So things like that, where you're kind of, you have checks on the way up to make sure that you're properly positioned and balanced. And then not only are you checking and adjusting, but now you're reinforcing and strengthening those positions so that when you just go and snatch, you're doing it properly.
Well, in looking at, I just mentioned, and you call it RDL, I call them good mornings, but they, I guess now today's
good morning's got a bar on the back of the neck. And
but I learned, and when we translated them from Russian, we called all of the different snatch grip RDL stuff good mornings, because that was the translation from Russian.
I thought the translation was like bend overs.
No, it was
holding barbell bend over at hip.
Yeah, that was like pre-1991. Well, I mean, like Dragomir brought this RDL, calling it Romanian deadlift. But in any case, so I'll go with RDL, snatch grip RDLs. I mean, one of the things that it sounds like, and we were talking about, like maybe he's extending his knee and he's trying to get over the bar too much, too soon, and then staying over the bar. And when he gets to his hips, his shoulders are still in front of the bar. That's what it sounds like he's describing to me. That makes it really hard to keep the bar without like an extraordinary engagement of the lats. And that's one of the reasons we do that exercise, is to learn how to really engage and strengthen the lats, but you're not actually snatching like that. I mean, obviously Kolkoff does it sometimes and puts it on YouTube and then everybody copies him. But
let's not even bring that up.
I'm not going to bring that up. But I'm just saying it causes people to then go and do things. And I know that a lot of the Russian training system pulls that they teach here very often in the U.S., with people, as we import more and they go around doing seminars, they'll teach a pull that engages the lats longer and they stay over the bars longer. But if you actually see them snatch, by the time they get to the hips, their shoulders are aligned with bar.
Right.
Like in the real snatch. But they practice their pulls so that they hang a little bit more on the spinal erectors longer. And I think people sometimes take that and then they translate that into, like, I'm going to try to lift like this. But it's a different kind of a pull. Those kind of Russian style pulls that keep you over the bar longer are intended to strengthen your back and lats, but they're not intended to replicate your actual pull path for your snatch. And so you need to then look at that same lifter actually snatching and see if that's what he does in the actual snatch. And I'm not naming any names because there's a bunch of them. A lot of them pull that way and then snatch differently. I even do pulls like that sometimes. But if I'm doing a pull to mimic my actual snatch, then it doesn't look like that, right? My shoulders are coming back. The bar is actually moving up, back and towards me. One of the things that I always look at when I'm watching someone snatch, and this is just kind of in general, is the bar should always be moving, just not back, but up and back. And so that your arm is, the shoulder is the indicator of where the bar is going. So I feel like this guy, he's, getting to the hip and his shoulder is still in front. Well, then that means the bar is not into your hip. So use the shoulder as an indicator of where the bar is going and watch that. It should create kind of a curved path as you stand with your shoulder. And that would indicate that the bar is actually coming towards you as you're standing with your hips to the bar.
Right.
But how does one balance staying over the bar and also keep the feet, I think you put feet down and weight back. You just had a typo.
That's what I'm looking at right now. Is I think he's way too far back on the heels.
On the heels, yeah. No, that you addressed that. I'm not even going to bother addressing that. But I want to say something about just feeling the difference in the balance. So if you do a snatch grip RDL, you're going to feel this kind of excessive pressure on the heel. But if you then go below your knee and close your knee angle, like you would in an actual pull, and then reopen your knee angle as you pass, you're in a different position and you'll feel a different foot pressure. And so just for him to be able to get the sense of what the difference in the pressure is from being too heavy on the heel right below the knee or as he passes the knee to more balanced, I would suggest like just feeling what it feels like to do a snatch grip RDL from below the knee with your knee already back versus closing your knee angle and doing something that mimics a pull. And that should give you a sense of the difference in the foot pressure between the two. You shouldn't feel that same really heavy heel pressure as you're passing your knee. It's not as heavy.
I think that's one of the real common misinterpretations of coaching cues and things is this heel thing, is that people are saying, I'm trying to get all the way back on my heel on the pole. No, don't. Yeah. You shouldn't be water skiing in that pole. You should not be so far back on your heel. That whole foot needs to be in contact with the floor. You need pressure across the whole foot. I would say that you're looking for just a very slight preference for the heel. So slightly more on the heel than on the balls of the foot during that pull, but that doesn't mean you're on your heels. You're not lifting on peg legs. And so that, again, we talked about this previously, but that is going to cause you to jump forward or rock forward almost every time. If you can keep it back like that, then yes, you're going to jump back, as Channing asked here in the end of this, because you're directing all your weight backwards. It's just like if you stood without a bar and tried to jump backwards. You jump backwards because you've shifted your center of mass behind your base. And so that's what you're doing in a pull. If you get all the way back on your heels like that and continue to keep it back, you'll jump back. So he says
and your shoulder will probably continue moving back instead of moving up. So by the time the bar gets to your hip, you should see the shoulder and the chest elevate. And if the shoulders keep going back, so that little curve that you're creating as you're standing, bringing the bar into your hip, continues to go back, which is the question I think we're dealing with next, then you know that you haven't created elevation. You're essentially doing like a snake snatch.
Yeah, but to be clear, though, at the top of a pull, especially in the snatch, the shoulders will be behind the hips. You can't be in a perfectly vertical position.
I'm talking about the torso elevation. That would indicate that there's upward force.
Yeah, but so I would say jumping backwards is not wrong. You can jump backwards half a foot length or so, a couple inches. I think that's the conventional wisdom. That's if everything is moving backwards. So your feet, your body, and the bar all coming backwards the exact same amount so that you end up under the bar in the proper position in balance. If just your feet are moving back and the bar and the rest of your body are staying forward, then it's wrong. If you and your feet, your body and your feet are going backwards and the bar is staying in front, then it's wrong. And if it's excessive, like it's more than 3 inches or so, then it's going to be a problem. So you definitely need to adjust, and the whole goal is to keep everything balanced over your foot, right? And so if you're moving from that original position, you have not stayed balanced on average throughout that movement. And so a little bit of backward movement is okay. Forward, I say no, not at all. Although there's always someone who argues, oh, whoa, this guy jumped forward. Yes, there are fucking anomalies in the world.
It's like 10, we did this whole, I don't know if you actually read the manual that I sent you that I'm working on for the book. And the original parts of the manual, there's 2 parts in there that actually address this. One is the foot pressure charts from Garhammer. Did you look at those? I know you've seen them before.
I've seen them before, yeah.
Yeah, so those foot pressure charts have like Bob Heiss III, Garhammer, and then another lifter that was actually like a good lifter. And they show the different foot pressure differences. And the one that was the best actually had the least shifting. And it went from and of course you're just looking at the force plate reading. So it doesn't mean because the force plate reading that is over the metatarsals or the metatarsophalangeal joint, it doesn't mean that the person has all their weight there. It just means that's where the bar was when it started off the ground. And then it moves to the top of the ankle. And then it goes back to that same position when they're coming onto the balls of the foot. But the person who lifted the most, and I don't know that we can then extrapolate from that it's, that you want to move it a shorter distance, but that's probably the appropriate amount of shifting that should happen on the foot from, the metatarsophalangeal joint to the top of the ankle back to the metatarsophalangeal joint. And, if you looked at the other ones, some of them are real kind of curved out to the side of the foot and real long. And those generally were the other 2 people that lifted less weight.
Yeah.
And so the more movement you have, that more rocking that we talked about, the less efficient your drive through the ground becomes, because the more movement you have forward and back as opposed to just up and down.
Yes. I concur.
There was one other, what was the other? In terms of all of these bar paths, the one that you've described was the one that is, there's a bar path that kind of retouches the metatarsophalangeal line where the bar started. And then there are some that stay behind it. The ones that stay behind it can still be an acceptable S-curve with a slight jump backward.
I think Zlatan Vanev's probably the best, most well-known example of a successful backward jumping lifter.
And there are quite a few Bulgarians that had, these jump backs, and we still see some. There are a couple of high-level lifters that jump slightly forward, but it's slight. And again, I think, and this is data that was gathered long ago, the best or the most world records were broken at the point that this data was collected. And it's, this is Garhammer's work, was the most efficient, which is what we're describing, having the least shift and having kind of the tightest S-curve. The 35% of world records were broken with a slight jump back. It was only 10% that had a slight jump forward. And again, we're talking about, less than half of a foot length. And so you might see some of those. And I think it gets confusing when people see people who jump a little bit forward and they think, oh, that's okay. you got to remember they're also lifting really, really heavy weight. It could be that they just got pulled forward a little bit.
Right. Using
Like
competition.
they didn't intentionally jump forward. Like the bar path is generally with lighter weights for elite level lifters, a little bit looser, and they tighten it up as it gets heavier. Like there's all of these little things that we know about how people lift that mean that you can't then go look at them lifting any one particular weight and get a full view of how they really move. You've got to really watch them warm up from beginning to end. That's why watching people like Natalie warm up from beginning to end is so impressive, because you see so little variation in the movement. It shows such restraint and consistency, and both the ability to generate force to a certain height and the ability to maintain a very precise bar path that makes those kinds of lifters so impressive in terms of how technical they are. And you might see there are other world level lifters that aren't so precise. Like, anyways,
well, and I think it's a mistake though, and a common one. It's a mistake to use competition lifts as examples of technique, as models of technique, because like you said, these are usually absolute maximal attempts. They're not going to necessarily model ideal technique. And even in that same lifter, if you take 10% off of it, it might look very different. Not very different, but it might look different. So a lot of those forward jumps, if you take 5%, 10% off that lift, they're not going to jump forward anymore. It was an error, not a technique. Right. And so you need to be careful about that. And I think so. You said it perfectly. Is you need to look at the totality of their lifting, and the overwhelming majority of that is going to be that, under 80%, under 85%, and those are going to be what you're looking at for, truly what that lifter's motion looks like. But anyway, Channing, I hope that makes sense. So in order to actually fix this, do what Ursula was saying with the RDL thing, I like stuff like slow pull snatches. So move slowly from the floor to about mid-thigh, to the point that you explode, so you can really feel that position and adjust on your way up. Halting snatch deadlifts, segment pulls, floating snatch deadlifts or floating snatch pulls. In other words, after the first rep, after you finish, come back down and get the weight as close to the floor as you can without allowing it to touch. You do a series of those, and that's going to really help you feel your balance, because there's no way to kind of mask an imbalance by dropping the bar or moving really quickly. You have to maintain that control the whole way. Any last thoughts on that?
No, I think we
beat that one to death.
Yeah, I think we have a tendency to do that.
I think we beat that horse to death, and then a couple of other nearby horses got a little abused too.
Some tangent horse.
Yeah, there was some collateral horse damage. All right. Dave asks, confused about torso position at the finish. So many great coaches teach a vertical torso throughout the third pull, yet I see world-class lifters leaning way back as the bar comes off the hip. Are they pulling back or just getting out of the way of the rising bar? My first thought is, I don't know I've ever heard any coach say they want a vertical torso in the third pull. I mean, not perfectly vertical.
Pull, like throughout the third pull, because you're pulling under, so you have to the bar has to go where you were, so you have to get back to get out of the way. So otherwise, it moves out too far out forward.
Well, we just talked about this in the previous question. Is that at the very top of the second pull, you're kind of the textbook position would be your legs. If you're looking at the lifter from the side, the legs are about vertical. Hips are above the ankles. And then the shoulders are slightly behind the hips. So the hips are hyperextended, but the legs are about vertical. So the torso is already past vertical. Mm-hmm. And so going into the third pull, you're not vertical to begin with. So you wouldn't get vertical until the bar has passed your head and you're moving the bar back into position and your trunk forward into position. And so you'd be vertical for that split second as you went from behind the bar to in front of the bar with your trunk. I hope that description made sense. Would you agree with that, or did you not even understand what I just said?
I was reading.
I was reading something unrelated. So in other words, Dave, no, what you're seeing is correct. They're leaning, I wouldn't say way back. You're going to get, again, variation in how far back different lifters are. And that's going to be based primarily on how they finish the second pull, what position they end up there. But like Ursula said, we're trying to, there will be an S curve on the bar because the bar and the body have to kind of interact in a way that maintains the balance of the system of those two things together. And so the heavier the bar is relative to the body, the more the body has to move around the bar and the straighter the bar path is going to be. So if you've got someone snatching double body weight plus, you're going to see that body move farther back around the bar so the bar can go more directly, because that's what's going to maintain balance over the base. That said, though, even if you had a directly vertical bar path, the body never has to go farther back than to get out of the way of the bar. In other words, the body should still be as close to the bar as possible in any case, no matter where the bar is, really. I would say it's excessive if someone is leaning back to a point where there's more distance between the bar and the body than there needs to be for that lifter and the bar to pass each other.
Well, I mean, if you look at someone from the side and you see like the distance between them and the bar longer than, say, the radial ulnar length, I think you have a problem.
Yes.
I think that's what we generally see, like the radius ulnar length is like the distance with the shoulders back, right? The torso up and back. And then you'll see, and that's the turnover. Like if you can get that to be shorter, it's better.
Yeah, I would say you'd like it inside that anyway.
The displacement is less. Right, then the displacement is less. But I think we get some still shots of lifters, and I'm thinking particularly of Lydia, where it looks like she's way, way back and the distance is a little bit more than that. But she's got a little bit different technique too, in that she kind of pulls back from the knee to the hip more quickly and then travels back.
Right.
And so sometimes you're looking at something in terms of a technical difference. I think the key point is, are you generating force through the ground? And if you are, then the variation and the way the extension looks might vary. But if you're just throwing like from your hang position, as you pass through your vertical position, your shoulders keep moving back like you're just doing a back bend, then you're really not creating that force through the ground. Then you've got a problem, because then that's going to affect the actual displacement of the bar.
Right.
And now, I mean, I know that his question is more about teaching a vertical torso. I think this vertical torso idea is it's kind of the older school Russian style of both teaching pulls and teaching extension. There are some lifters that are incredibly straight in their extension, like they don't lean that far back. So there's a lot of, again, there's room for variation here. And I remember some of the best lifters of my day, there was like very slight extension back, but they were also very powerful athletes, and they could generate a lot of speed and height on the bar without having to apply. And this is when it goes back to that impulse question. Like they could create a lot of force over a short period of time. So they didn't have a very deep position when the bar was in the power position, like their knees and hips weren't very closed, but without leaning too, so much extension with the torso, they could generate a lot of height or force. And so you wouldn't see them lean so far back in the turnover. One of the exercises I use to try to determine like individually how much, like what your turnover should look like from extension into receiving is, and we talked about this exercise before, Greg, and I probably need to, I don't know if you have a video up or not, but we might need to add one, is this, and I know you have like power position snatches, but a hip muscle squat snatch where it's just really, and I know you have like a form of you have tall snatches on there. I think those might be an example as well, but trying to figure out what somebody's extension looks like exactly into the receiving position, because it is a little bit, just like we're talking about jerk depth and dip depth, it's individualized. And so this hip muscle squat snatch that we use allows you to generate some force from the legs, extend the torso and turn over. And then you can see like how far the chest should move back away from the bar when that person turns over, as long as they're not creating a big loop and a lot of space between them and the bar. Like the closer you can keep the bar in proximity to your body, the better, the tighter that S curve is, and the less you lose in height in terms of the displacement.
Yeah. Well, and so just to finish this out, his last question, or really his only question, I guess, is, are they pulling back or just getting out of the way of the bar? So really, they're getting out of the way of the bar. They have to move their body around the bar to maintain balance and keep that bar moving unimpeded. But at the same time, yes, they are kind of pulling back in the sense that they're using their arms and shoulders and back to keep the bar and body as close to each other as possible. In other words, they're not just leaning back and then kind of relaxing and falling under the bar. They're actively pulling to try to maintain that proximity, because if they don't, you're going to split apart.
If you have mass, you can keep using that mass. The problem that I run into with this question when you say pulling back is, I mean, then you're starting to indicate that they're driving through the bar, that they were never really driving through the ground, that they were driving like angularly through the ground.
No, I think my understanding is that he's asking if, like, with their arms, are they pulling the bar back toward them?
I was just trying to see if I do translate it into like the way that they're generating force. You know how you see people do push presses and they scooch back on every single rep? Mm-hmm. That's somebody not driving through the ground on the push press. They're driving like against the ground at an angle. And we generally try to get them
stopping too early and have they weight too far back.
It could be that too. But I'm just trying to like figure out if there's something
else. I think he's talking about strictly the third pull. So when they're moving under and they're leaning back, are they pulling the bar back towards their body? And so
I think by that point you're primarily done generating force. So all you could be doing is using your mass a little bit, and like you said, working with that combined mass with the bar to try to pull yourself under. But that's not the same as that's mostly getting out of the way of the bar.
What I'm saying here, woman.
Okay, well.
So if
you're confusing.
He's already generated the upward force on the bar, right? Now he'll still be putting force against the bar by pulling under. But it's primarily finished. But if the person is then leaning back, which he's saying they're leaning way back, he's asking, are they pulling the bar back? And I'm saying, no, they're not pulling the bar back exactly, but they are pulling against the bar with their arms as part of that turnover, because they're actively trying to keep the bar in towards the body. Right. Which really, if the bar is heavier than the body, that's keeping the body close to the bar, not the other way around. Yeah. But so yes, they're pulling back in that sense that they are trying to keep the body and the bar as close to each other as possible during that turnover, instead of allowing the body to just lean back and fall back away from the body. So hopefully, Dave, that made sense, even though Ursula doesn't understand what I'm saying.
I got that. Check.
All right. Well, we should probably end there and save this next one for the next episode, because this one could be epic.
Up. We're at a minute.
That's Rasmus's question. Let's save that one.
Rasmus is on deck.
All right, Rasmus, hang tight, buddy. We'll get to you in the next episode. We haven't forgotten.
Yeah, in the next year or so.
Well, 2 weeks.
It feels that long sometimes.
It does. But don't you enjoy it so much more? We don't have to talk that often.
Yeah, imagine if we did this weekly.
That'd be terrible. All right, everybody.
Don't lie, Greg. You missed me all week.
Yes, it's terrible. I really struggle to get through it. All right, guys. We'll talk to you next time. Hope you enjoy it.
All right, thanks.
Please go rate and review the show if you get a minute. And again, you can send us your questions at catalystathletics.com/podcast. And we will hopefully do as amazing of a job answering your question as we did with Taylor, Channing, and Dave's today. All right. See ya.
All right. See ya.